Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Life with Lizzie show. And today is going to be kind of more of like I need to get this off my chest. I don't really even know who I can go to about this, so I'm just going to go to the podcast. And I'm not necessarily looking for advice. I just am hoping someone out there is listening to me and sends all the love and prayers. But I just feel like I need to vent. So let's get started. Essentially, if you're listening to this, you may or may not know, I'm going for a home birth, in a few months, and it'll be a home birth after cesarean. There's not many fears at this point, I feel like, around the actual, birthing the baby. I know there's still work I need to do. There's more education I need to do. I know that for myself. But overall, I think I've pushed past the huge fears of I can't birth my baby. But I will tell you some of the fears I still have. And I will probably cry during this. I'm telling y'all, I feel like I know there's people out there that understand, but it's really hard for me to feel like I'm being a burden to people, and that I don't want to suppress my trauma or my negativity, what people perceive as negativity, or anything. I don't want to push that on other people, and you know what I mean? So I feel like this is a safe space to do so. But some of the fears that I have still are not feeling supported, and not even in the way most people would think. There's a lot of women out there that in VBAC groups, which is, if you don't know, VBAC stands for vaginal birth after cesarean. HBAC, which is what I'm going for, is a home birth after cesarean. So a lot of women, it's very unfortunate, come in these support groups on Facebook and are their family is pressuring them to get another C-section. Their family is completely against their home birth. And just very negative, pessimistic, not supportive at all, putting a mother in a very uncomfortable, horrible situation that no mother should ever be put into. I'm very grateful I'm not in that situation. I don't have anyone specifically saying to me, you shouldn't do a home birth. My mom everyone is in full support. Nick's cool with it. My husband, my mom's cool. No one has outwardly came, and I'm sure there are people that probably don't agree with it, but I don't care. I don't care about the opinions of what, that, because overall I feel like I am supported in that way. So here's where I'm scared. And I think if you are a VBAC mom, or you've had cesareans and you've thought about having a vaginal birth, or even if you decide to have another C-section, it's I'm not saying that all births don't have their own complications. There are vaginal births that, the recovery was harder than their C-sections. But I think there is this general feeling with mothers that have had C-sections, especially unplanned, who had an idea of going in, wanting a natural labor, who had all these, I say expectations, but they should be expectations. And I know we live in this society where people dog on moms for having birth plans and for having these expectations for birth. And yes, while there should be some some education, right, for these moms, I didn't educate myself much before birth to understand that there are certain expectations that, might not happen. However, and I just mean physiologically, right? I'm not talking about interventions from doctors. I'm saying that we should respect birth plans and expect birth wishes and things like that if they aren't in any way harming the birth process and things like that. And so many people scoff at the idea that women have these expectations for birth and sit there and say, I just went with the flow and blah, blah, blah. And it's that's why we have trauma, though. You know what I mean? We have trauma because a lot of us didn't get basic human respect in our births, whether they had a C-section or vaginal birth or whatever. And everyone's experience is different, but in general, VBAC moms that have went through surgery and are trying to fight the system to have a birth at home, even though I don't have people in my ear physically telling me all these things, I know that there is the possibility of being transferred to the hospital and doctors, treating me a certain way because they hate home birth transfers. Not all of them. I know I can't speak for everybody, but this is a very much general thing. I don't want to feel the biggest fear. This is went on such a long rant. You guys know how I am. Realistically, what this is all boiling down to, what I'm coming down to, saying all of the things I've just said in the last 5 minutes, is that while yes, I don't have anybody in my ear saying you can't do it, this is stupid, this is unsafe. No one's saying that. I still have this incredible fear that nobody is going to be there for me the way I need, and this is where I get emotional. And there's these pieces of my mind, so many, my mind is like a puzzle piece, okay? And I could be thinking of one general subject, and there's 7 different puzzle pieces fitting in together where I'm trying to make it all make sense. So there's this piece of me that's well, I can't expect anybody to, besides God, which I'll get into spiritually in a minute, because there's a piece of that as well. But, I can't expect anybody to just be my savior at my birth and just say all the right things. But I really want that. And I'm not saying I want someone to do the work for me. I'm doing a lot of prep work, I'm trying really hard, but there's this incredible fear that I'm not going to have the support that I really want. Yes, I don't have people in my ear, but does that mean that people are going to be there the way that I need? I don't know, It scares me. I didn't have any support with Anakin, my son. Not that Nick wasn't bad. Not that my husband was bad. He had to go let our dogs out multiple times. And he was gone from the hospital for a while. We lived 30 minutes from the hospital. So it's an hour's just of driving to get to the dogs, and he's got to let them out. He needed to take a shower. We were there at the hospital for over a week, or almost a week, 6 days. And so he was in and out. My mom couldn't be there. Even myself, I didn't really even know what was going on, was going to end up the way it did. So it was just both of our first times. My doctor was obviously completely unsupportive of my birth plans, completely, from the moment I told her my birth plans. And so it's scary. I don't want to somehow, even with my midwives and stuff, and this is something I plan to bring up to them, and it makes me really nervous and anxious to even talk to them about this, and I don't know why, but even though they seem okay with the home birth, they wouldn't have took me on as it's a liability on them too, just like doctors, they outweigh their risk and benefits, and they took me on and everything's been fine, but I'm still scared. What if I get backed in a corner? What if my wishes just get thrown out the window when they didn't have to be? What if I don't feel respected? What if I feel like no one's listening to me? Because that's how I felt with my son, on the operating table, nobody was listening to me. And it's just really, there is still a lot of trauma. You guys know. I think I feel like I have done a lot of work to move past it, but it's I still have that little fear, Like I said, not even of birth, not where I truly feel like I am capable of birthing my baby myself. I do. I really do. But I feel obviously I don't want to do it alone, and so I'm just scared that having those other people is what's going to stop me, so then I'm okay, here's the other piece of the puzzle. I was sitting there thinking okay, so I've been listening to podcasts and stuff on birth and VBACs, a lot of VBAC stuff, and, births after their first birth was traumatic. And, there are some women that say they think that they want certain things in their labor. And then when the time comes, it's kind of a different situation. So for instance, like say me, like, okay, just let's do a fake scenario, but I've heard this in podcasts particularly, and you'll understand the gist. So say I'm over here like crying because I think I need these people to help me, and I think that I require their support to be able to get through it. That's what I think I want. That's what I'm obviously scared I won't even have. But what if in the moment I don't even want to, I want my space? What if I am able to labor alone for a long time, and that is exactly what I needed versus thinking I needed all these people? Because there is also this, there's going to be a lot of people in my house, and I thought about that the other day, and that also makes me nervous. So I'm like, I don't even know exactly what I want too. And I guess it's because I'm doing it all over again for the first time. I don't know what is going to best aid me and suit me and help me during such a transformational time in my life. There's going to be my midwife, 2 assistants, my husband for sure. That's at least 4 other adults in my house, and potentially my mom, and potentially a doula. That's just so much. And so in my mind, if I could say what I would imagine, again, it could change, right? In the moment, I might not want this as a birth, but when I try to think of what I want my birth to look like, ideally, I would love if it was just my husband, my midwife, and honestly a doula, and that's just them 3 adults, and not 5 people, or possibly more. Because the thought of having a lot of people in my house makes me uneasy too, and it's I don't know. It's just a lot to unpack, you guys. It really is. And there are a lot of people who don't understand trauma from birth. And I would just be you're grateful that you don't have that, because it is debilitating. And having another child, you have to work through it. You could ignore it, but what good is that going to do me, ignoring and suppressing this? So I live with it for the next 30 or 40 years versus getting through it now, So I guess that's a huge fear. It's just lack of support. And then possibly just feeling not respected. And I feel a woman birthing her child is absolutely the time she should be the most respected, When I was listening to a podcast the other day, they had said something I was just telling you guys about birth plans. Doctors scoff at that, and a lot of the nurses don't really like it, and they never get respected. In very rare instances do birth plans ever get respected, unless a mom's very adamant and, puts that out there that, okay, this is what I want and this is what I'm going to get, kind of thing. And that usually comes from subsequent births. Is that how you say that? Multiple births afterwards. It's rare you see that with the first time mom, right? Even with the second time mom, it might take her the third time to finally speak up for herself. And even then it can sometimes be a battle, but that's how it is when it comes to birth and mothers. But when it comes to someone's wedding, think of how much your insurance is paying your hospital to have birth. It's well over $15,000. I know my hospital stay had to have been up to $70,000. We were there for 6 days. I can only imagine how much the hospital got from insurance, okay? But we're in no control when it comes to our medical care. We do, but we don't think we do. We don't think we have this control. But if you're having a wedding and you pay a wedding planner $15,000, you're going to tell them every little detail that you want and every little thing that, you're expecting, and, just communicating with them. You're paying this person all this money for your wedding. And it's like, I feel like that opened my eyes so much to realize how much lack of respect we get as women. And even when we think we're being respected, it's really a scary time when you're pregnant. Just in this time, birth and mothers are not valued how they should be in society, as a whole. We're very much undervalued, and, trying to get my dogs not to bark. We're very much undervalued and not respected when it comes to labor, delivery, birth. I mean, incredibly just rude. And I even thought about it, like, with my birth instance, and this is like, I talk a lot about my birth trauma and like all that, but I will tell you, this is like very much things I read in groups every single day. People going through the exact same experience when I'm getting cut open for the first time ever on a metal table with like 15 strangers in the room playing music, didn't even ask me anything that I wanted to, like, I don't even remember what song was playing, didn't ask me. Okay, nobody's talking to me. The 2 surgeons over my body pulling my first child out that I went through infertility to get pregnant with, that, my dream baby. They're having an everyday discussion about COVID and like work policies and shit. And I'm just alone. And I've mentioned this so many times on social media. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. I'm in a room full of people, but I'm alone. I'm birthing my baby, but like, I'm not. And I'm not saying like diminishing a C-section birth. Like, a C-section birth can be very empowering and beautiful if you feel you have some say-so in it. If you feel like if you're a part of it. They don't include moms in these surgeries most often. You're pretty much, the mom is just is a surgical patient on a table. And imagine that being at your wedding. Imagine people playing the music they wanted to play while you walk down the aisle. Imagine your friends and family are over there talking about COVID policies and shit while you're saying your vows. Like, you know what I mean? When you think about the contrast with a major life event like a marriage, which most marriages fail these days anyway, we put so much more everything into that. But when it comes to birth and a mom, it's like, she's like, in this country, it's like we're excluded from the equation. And I hope that gives someone some perspective. If you're listening to this, I don't know. I would love to know. Like, I'm asking for an opinion. If that made sense to you, like comparing birth to a wedding, or even a graduation party, or what, I don't care. Think of something really life transformational, like for you. Your event, your birthday party, your sweet 16, I don't care what it is. You're not going to let somebody come and just take over. There is a time and place where medical intervention is necessary. And I'm not saying women shouldn't have, someone that is educated in that field, which doctors are not educated in natural birth. Prove me wrong. I'm waiting. They're not. And I'm not saying that. I'm sure if you're listening, you don't. I'm sure if you're listening, you kind of understand more of where I'm coming from. I'm just saying, like, to anyone who could disagree, like, doctors aren't educated in natural physiological birth. They are truly not. They're educated in surgical birth, whether that be a vaginal surgical birth with vacuum forceps, whatever, episiotomy, all that stuff, or a C-section. That is what they're trained in. That is what they know. That is what they do every single day. They don't do natural births. What would be the point of them being there? So midwives are the experts in natural birth. And so, I mean, not all midwives are the same. Obviously, that's not a blanket statement, but in general, finding someone who is an expert in natural physiological birth, I think is a great option for women to have at their births. Like, I'm not telling you to not have your baby by yourself, or to have your baby by yourself, or whatever. I'm not giving advice, but what I'm saying is we don't have that in our society. We don't have, we're putting ourselves in this medicalized system, and nothing is valued, and we're looked at as patients, and we're perfectly healthy women just wanting to bring our babies into this world. And just the more, it's like every time I get past something, just something else pops up, you know? And I think that's why I'm like just reprocessing some things. I still think I've definitely made a lot of progress through all this. It's just until I get past it, I don't know. Until I have the home birth, like, I don't know where I'll be. Because there's always new information I'm learning. There's always new stories I'm reading, you know, trying to be like, okay, what would I do in this situation? Because I'm over here already kind of like in fight or flight mode. Like, what am I going to do if I get backed into a corner? I'm terrified of that. And the other fear that I have, the main fear, like I said, the main fear is like the lack of support, or like that whole situation. And, you know, even if I get transferred to the hospital, I'm not scared of a transfer happening, if that makes sense. Like, I don't feel like a transfer is going to happen. That I you know what I mean? Like, that's not what scares me. But if a transfer does happen, what scares me is being backed into the corner at the hospital as well, and not being supported there. So it's just like making, you know, I have to make sure that I'm my biggest advocate at the end of the day. And that's actually, before I move on to the next fear, that is something I did mean to mention, and I've skipped around so many times talking about so many different things. But with the those puzzle pieces I was talking about earlier, like in my brain, you know, I've been listening to these podcasts and stuff, and there was this woman, that's where I was going with that story, with the woman that was, she labored a lot by herself. You know, she didn't call her midwives too early. She was very much in her own zone for a very long time. And even like, she didn't have her husband around her or anything. She just wanted to be like alone and do her own thing. I mean, think of an animal in the wild, right? So we're mammals. I mean, we all do birth quite similarly. And so I was listening to this podcast, to her talking about it, and, you know, spiritual things were coming up that she was having during the time of her labor. And I was like, you know, what if this is God being like, you know, you don't need these people in the physical form. Like, I don't need to sit there and try to rely on my midwife or a doula or my husband or my mom or whoever to make the experience exactly what I need it to be. Like, they can't do that for me anyway, even if they try. You know, the only person or being that can is God. And I'm not the most like in tune spiritually as far as like when it comes to my religion. I definitely believe in God and Jesus as my savior and all the things. I'm just not very like into church and stuff like I was at one point. So sometimes I feel like, you know, would God be calling me? But, you know, sometimes I do feel like that. Like, for instance, just advocating for birth and stuff, that's totally like a God thing. That's not like a me thing. It's like God is literally calling me to do that. But when it comes to the actual birth itself, I'm like, that's what I'm wondering, like trying to process. Okay, God, like, what are you trying to tell me? Are you trying to say like just to rely on you, like start going through prayer, like things like that, you know? That's kind of where my head is at this moment as well too. Like, I don't know, but that's kind of scary too. I mean, you know, like it's just scary, the unknowns. And, you know, the crazy thing is that we have been taught that like birth is all this unknown things. And, you know, it kind of is. But if we grew up in a society where it was more normalized and we actually knew what real birth looked like, and our moms talked about how empowering birth can be versus how horrible it is, because obviously the medical system has completely traumatized women. The birth trauma is going through generations that has happened in the obstetrics community. It's ridiculous how that actually gets passed down. And so, of course, all we hear is these bad stories and all this horrible experiences and whatever. And I know I share my experiences as well. But if we grew up in this society where we can kind of change the way we view birth and the way we feel about, you know, just physiological normal things and not having to pathologize everything, which is, you know, doctors trying to always find something wrong. They look for something wrong in everything. And that's what they're taught to do. And we don't need that in birth. So if things were a little different, maybe I wouldn't be as, naturally anxious and nervous. But we live in that society, and that's just kind of the reality of the situation. And so, there's always the unknowns of birth. There's always the unknowns of the next 5 minutes. I mean, a meteor can hit my house. Who's to say it won't? Who's to say whatever? I don't want to think of bad, horrible stories that could possibly happen. But, we never really know. So it's like our bodies know how to have a period naturally. Our bodies know how to pump blood. Our bodies know how to breathe oxygen. We know how to blink. Birth is just another physiological normal process of the woman's body. And we just treat it like this. It's some weird random thing that's just, I guess, happening to part of the population, Real quick, the second fear, or whatever, the fear that's on my mind is breastfeeding. And again, not looking for help unless you hear me ask for it, just because I know when I was going through it with my son, and I would always get just the same advice over and over and over and over and over again. And I know people mean well, but until I ask for the opinion, I just know I usually don't want it unless I ask, just because it affects me mentally. And I think if you ever work online where people are constantly in your messenger, I have hundreds of messages within the week that I go through between all the platforms, it's you hear a lot of the same things, and I just have to protect myself mentally, okay? Because it just becomes annoying, and it's not people particularly, it's just my ears having to see, or I guess my eyes having to read it over and over and over again. So I'm not necessarily asking for advice. I'm just venting again. Breastfeeding is actually terrifies me. And not there's some women that are scared that'll be weird for them, or I don't know really what, I can't say all the exact other reasons. I know that some women have different reasons for not wanting to breastfeed. And I don't not want to breastfeed. I do want to breastfeed. I'm just really terrified I'm not going to be able to feed my baby full time. And not that there's anything wrong with having to supplement. I really don't want to if I don't have to. And it's a whole, honestly, the breastfeeding scares me more than the freaking birth. I mean, straight up, and I know I spent way longer talking about the birth than breastfeeding. But I feel the birth is something I've had to work through sooner than later before breastfeeding, because I feel having a better birth will, hold on. I can't tell if my son is awake and crying. I don't think he is. So I feel having a better birth experience obviously could only most likely help breastfeeding and not hinder it, versus having a surgical birth and being separated from your baby and whatever. So, but, there is something called IGT. You could look it up, insufficient glandular tissue. Supposedly only a super, super tiny, small population of women have it. And I believe I have it, and I don't want to manifest that on myself. You guys don't know how badly I don't want to claim that. I don't, but maybe it's intuitively, I just know I have it, and I don't want to keep telling myself that. But I also don't want to ignore what I think is my reality. You know what I mean? And I feel I've been led to follow my intuition more, in this stage of my life. And that's why I feel going through just even talking about the support people and stuff, maybe this is God's way of being you need to rely on me and me only. And so I feel I'm not going to have the right support with breastfeeding 100%. That's also another thing, because of what I believe I have. Nobody understands. And when I say that, I mean nobody in my circle. All my friends really had successful breastfeeding. I mean, pretty much any friend that's had a kid that I've been close to. Most of them have had C-sections, but most of them had great, successful breastfeeding journeys. And even if the journeys didn't turn out exactly how they wanted to, that it was just very different situations, right? I don't know anyone personally in my life that has went through how my whole situation was. And not only that, like, if you have IGT, I don't know. It's just not something people know about, And I even reached out to somebody that I felt like would be a good resource to kind of get some, like, information to help me on it more. And she even dismissed me, and I was kind of shocked. Like, I cried. I had like a full meltdown the other day because maybe I'm over here just relying. I mean, I'm doing research again. Like, y'all don't get me wrong. Like, I'm over here researching day and night. My brain, I don't know how much more breastfeeding and birth crap I can put in my brain. Okay. But like, I was kind of looking for validation, I guess. So I messaged this girl that I feel like gives a lot of great information, that really knows her stuff. And I was like, hey, listen, she shares like, different topics to educate her audience on social media. So I said something like, hey, I've done my research, but I would honestly love to see your point of view. What do you think about IGT? Like, I personally believe that, it has a lot to do with like environmental factors. They say it's genetic or whatever, but my mom was able to successfully breastfeed like all of us. Like, she didn't do it long for me and my sister, but she had no problems. Like, as far as her supply was great, whatever. My brother, she breastfed for a couple months exclusively. So until he probably started eating food. So, I don't know if mine's even genetic. I feel like mine might even be more of like hormonal, environmental factors growing up, whatever. Anyway, so I just sent her this super long novel, like, hey, I'm just kind of curious if you would like educate people more on it and like maybe how to help it, because there are different ways depending on what is wrong with you as far as your IGT diagnosis, like different medicines you can take, different herbs you can take, different foods you can cut out. Like, it just depends on your personal situation. But overall, like, I was just hoping that this girl would have some like insightful, like deep knowledge, because she has on so much other stuff. And then I basically got like a 30-second voice clip that was like, yeah, it's pretty much genetic. Basically, like, literally that was it. I got nothing from it, and I just sobbed. And I'm not mad at her, by the way. And it's like, I don't want to victimize, like, oh, this person didn't know. It's just that, like, that's where I'm at right now, that I'm just constantly trying to find more information and hear from other people and, like, set myself up. And sometimes I just feel like I'm being let down. I'm letting myself down or something. I don't know. So that kind of, like, it just made me know, like, even people that seem to know everything, they don't know much about IGT. Like, people just really don't. Like, what is telling, it's not always, I don't believe it's always genetic. And again, I got like no help from that. And so I don't know. I'm just in this space of like feeling I have so much support, but I feel so alone. And that's like a really shitty feeling like no one knows what that feels like. And I feel like a lot of people don't care. And I don't mean like, oh, they don't care about me. I mean, like, there's a lot of people out there that have never cared to breastfeed, never cared to have a vaginal birth, never cared to have a natural birth. So it's like, I'm not gonna, like, why would I talk to those people? You know what I mean? Why would I go talk to the people that don't care? Like, they don't understand. And then again, the other group of people I feel like I have in my life, it's just, they didn't have that problem. So it's like feeling very isolated. And I'm in the support groups, and there's so many women that have similar stories, but it's like you want someone close to you to just be there and get it. And no one really does, so that's not me I'm not mad at anyone. It's just the reality of my situation, and I'm grateful I have people that are praying that everything works out. I don't even know there's so much to unpack with the breastfeeding stuff in these next couple weeks because, birth is, we got a while to go, but it will be here, and I have a lot of prep work to do, and I really would love to be successful this time, and not for some title, and not to prove anyone or anything. It's like I want to do it for me and my baby, Like everything I do, I don't care, if what people think, like on social media, or I don't want to look better than anybody. I just want to have like the basic desires of my heart. And that's like to have a peaceful birth, to bring my baby in this world, and to be able to nourish and feed my baby from my body like I was designed to. And I feel like we live in a society where moms are guilted into like not being allowed to feel how they want to feel. And it's, I always feel guilty for having just every feeling I have. And that's something else I have to work through. You guys, your girl's messed up. And being pregnant just makes it so much harder. But that was my whole spiel on my fears for baby number 2. Not even baby number 2, just the birth. Well, I guess baby number 2, but like not the baby, more so like my body breastfeeding, and then like my surroundings and my environment with the birth. But if you are the spiritual type of person, I would appreciate prayers that everything turns out just the way I would love it to. I'm tearing up again thinking about it, but it means a lot to me. Like, personally, I don't understand how some women don't value birth and breastfeeding. I don't relate. I don't understand, because to me, it's like takes me to my core, and it's like, it makes me feel like the whole subject, not even like in a bad way. Like, yeah, I cry and I have like things to work through, but like, it's just so beautiful and like powerful. And I think if the world valued pregnancy and labor and delivery and breastfeeding, if we valued it at the level it should be valued at, this world would be such a better place. I really believe that. You got to think of how we're entering. Majority of the population is coming into this world is on medication, antibiotics, and drugs. Some, it's affecting us, and we're disconnecting more from birth all the time, and it's disconnecting humanity. And so when you really look at it at a deep level, birth and breastfeeding affect everything. People like to say it doesn't. People like to say, your kid's going to eat dirt in 2 years. Yeah, okay. But in reality, if everyone had a different outlook on what this could be, it doesn't mean everyone has to breastfeed. It doesn't mean everyone has to have a natural birth. It just means if we valued it more for what it's worth, and if we respected moms bringing their kids in this world, could you imagine how different this world would be if we supported moms through wanting to feed their baby instead of being like, fed is best, here's a bottle. That's not what most moms want, despite what they'll go along with, because they don't want to, you act like you don't want to give your kid formula, like you're this evil mom that wants to starve their baby. It's like, no, I want to breastfeed my child because that's what I want to do. That's what's normal. That's what's makes sense for me and my baby, It's just, I don't know. There's a lot to unpack living in America and living in this world, really, because the UK is not much better than we think, and all these other countries. Like, they are, but there's still a lot of deprogramming to do. So much deprogramming that I think I put all that weight on my chest for some reason. Like, it's my responsibility, and it's not. But I'm going to end this because this was really deep and intense. But like I said, I appreciate the prayers and the love and the support. And, if you ever would like to tell me your experience, if you are a VBAC mom, you had a home birth, I am open to hearing those things. Even if things didn't turn out the way you wanted, I am open to hearing birth stories, because I love hearing birth stories. And I think every mom deserves to have the space to tell her birth story, because, again, we live in a society that doesn't act like it's a big deal. And mom has birth trauma. It's like, oh, your baby survived. Why are you complaining? It's like, So I love and appreciate you guys so much. Seriously, thank you for spending 40 minutes of your time listening to me. I'm not editing this. I know there was moments of silence and me sneezing or like ew, sorry, that's gross, but those things. I appreciate you listening through it all, because this will be hard to edit if I went back and edited it. And I feel like I did a good job not going too off ramble. So yeah, I appreciate y'all. If you ever want to reshare the podcast, please screenshot sharing your stories. You could tag me on all the social medias at Lizzie and Littles, LIZZY AND LITTLES. And all my links will be in the show notes if you know how to get that. You can also share the podcast episode from wherever you're listening, actually. If you know a friend or somebody in your life that would appreciate this episode, or maybe could relate, or, maybe they're working through the same fears and just want to know they're not alone. I don't know. Whatever the case is, you can share that. There's a way to share it as well somewhere on the app. So, yeah. So I appreciate y'all, and I will catch you on the next episode of the show. Thank you for listening.